In this video, we're going to talk about those inmates who refused to eat their last meal. We're going to discuss the weird reasons they provided and what they wished for instead. You will be surprised to listen to some of the weird reasons they made and what prison staff actually did. Their overall last moments turned into unique. Johnny Frank Garrett, Texas, 1992. Johnny Frank Garrett was a death row prisoner executed by the state of Texas. Johnny Frank Garrett was accused of murdering a Catholic nun who lived across the street from him. On October 31, 1981, Garrett killed 76-year-old Sister Tadia Benz in the St. Francis Convent. According to the prosecution, Garrett raped, strangled, and killed her. On November 9, 1981, Garrett, who lived across the street from the convent, was arrested and charged with murder. Garrett was tried and convicted of the crime and sentenced to death. He was originally scheduled to be executed on January 6, 1992, but after Pope John Paul II asked for clemency, Governor of Texas Ann Richards gave him. He was examined by Dr. Dorothy Ottnow Lewis, who determined he had multiple personalities as a result of child abuse from his mother, grandmother, and grandfather. He was executed at age 28 at Huntsville Unit on February 11, 1992, by lethal injection. His final meal request was ice cream, but he was served the standard prison meal. He declined to say anything. James Homer Elledge, Washington, 2001. James Homer Elledge was an American murderer who was executed by lethal injection in Washington State Penitentiary for the murder of 47-year-old Eloise Jane Fitzner while on parole for another murder. At just 10 years old, Elledge was convicted of breaking into a building. As he got older, his crimes became more serious. In 1965, he was found guilty of armed robbery and kidnapping in New Mexico after he poured gasoline on a store clerk during a robbery. He spent about 3 years in prison for that crime. Death with a ball-peen hammer in an argument over his bill. He was convicted and served 15 years before being paroled. On April 18, 1998, James Elledge invited 47-year-old Eloise Fitzner and her friend to a church where he worked as a janitor. Pretending he had gifts and planned to take them to dinner, he lured them into a room. There, he tied them up and covered the friend's head. He then strangled Fitzner and stabbed her to make sure she was dead, hiding her body in a storage area. He took the other woman to his home, sexually assaulted her, and let her go the next day. She reported him to the police right away. Elledge was arrested 2 days later in Tacoma, Washington. On May 27, 1998, Elledge pleaded guilty to aggravated first-degree murder. Elledge was executed by lethal injection at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla on August 28, 2001. In his final moments, he ordered eggs, bacon, waffles, a sweet roll, cereal, and orange juice, but declined to eat. He made no final statement. Lawrence Russell Brewer, Texas, 2011. Lawrence Russell Brewer was a white supremacist who murdered James Byrd, Jr., an African American, in 1998 in Jasper, Texas. In the early hours of June 7, 1998, Brewer, along with John William King and Sean Barry, offered a ride to James Byrd, Jr., a 49-year-old African-American man walking home. Instead of taking him home, they drove to a secluded area where they beat him, chained him by the ankles to the back of a pickup truck, and dragged him for approximately 3 miles along a rural road. Byrd remained conscious for much of the ordeal and died when his body struck a culvert, severing his head and right arm. All three men were arrested the day after the murder. Brewer and King were convicted of capital murder in 1999 and sentenced to death. Barry was sentenced to life imprisonment. Brewer was executed by lethal injection on September 21, 2011, at the age of 44. He declined to make a final statement. He made an extensive last meal request, including 2 chicken fried steaks, a triple meat bacon cheeseburger, a cheese omelet, a large bowl of fried okra, 3 fajitas, a pound of barbecue, a meat lover's pizza, a pint of ice cream, peanut butter fudge, and 3 root beers. However, Brewer did not eat any of the food, stating he wasn't hungry. This led Texas to abolish the practice of allowing inmates to choose their last meals, with officials deeming it inappropriate to grant such privileges to those sentenced to death. James Edward Smith, Texas, 1990. James Edward Smith was born on October 19, 1952. He worked as a tarot card dealer in New Orleans, Louisiana, and later went to work as a taxi driver in Houston, Texas. On March 7, 1983, Smith attempted to rob the Union National Life Insurance Company in Houston. During the robbery, he fatally shot 44-year-old district manager Larry Don Rojas, who had complied with Smith's demands. Smith fled the scene, but was pursued by office workers and eventually apprehended by a passing detective. Smith was charged with capital murder and held without bond. During jury selection, he attempted to escape from the courthouse but was quickly recaptured. On April 5, 1984, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. On June 26, 1990, Smith was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. Smith requested a last meal of a lump of dirt intended for a voodoo ritual, but the request was denied, and he was instead given a cup of plain yogurt. His request to ask for dirt for a meal made him get a lot of attention. His final words were Hare Krishna, Ronnie Lee Gardner, Utah, 2010. Ronnie Lee Gardner was a Utah man executed by firing squad in 2010. Born on January 16, 1961 in Salt Lake City, Utah, Gardner had a troubled upbringing marked by abuse and early criminal behavior. He was convicted of robbery in 1980 and burglary and escape in 1981. In October 1984, Gardner fatally shot Melvin John Otterstrom during a robbery in Salt Lake City. While awaiting trial for this crime on April 2, 1985, he attempted to escape from the courthouse during a hearing. A female acquaintance had smuggled a loaded .22 caliber handgun to him, which he used to fatally shoot attorney Michael Burdell and wound a court bailiff. Gardner was shot and apprehended during the escape attempt. He was convicted of capital murder for Burdell's death and sentenced to death on October 22, 1985. Gardner spent 25 years on death row. On June 18, 2010, at Utah State Prison in Draper, Gardner was executed by a 5-man firing squad. The Gardner ate steak, lobster tail, apple pie, vanilla ice cream, and 7-Up 2 days prior to his execution. After his meal, Gardner fasted for 48 hours for spiritual reasons before his execution by firing squad. His last words were, "I do not forgive anybody. I do not seek forgiveness." Troy Davis, Georgia, 2011. Troy Anthony Davis was executed on September 21, 2011, in Georgia for the 1989 murder of off-duty police officer Mark McPhail. On August 19, 1989, Officer McPhail was shot and killed while intervening in an assault outside a Burger King in Savannah, Georgia. Davis was arrested and, in 1991, convicted based on eyewitness testimonies. Notably, there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and the murder weapon was never recovered. Over time, 7 of the 9 key prosecution witnesses recanted their testimonies, citing police coercion. In 2009, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered a federal judge to review the new evidence. However, the judge concluded that the evidence did not establish Davis's innocence. Davis's execution was delayed multiple times due to appeals. He was executed by lethal injection at 11:08 p.m. on September 21, 2011. Davis declined to choose a special meal. He was offered the standard prison meal but refused to eat, stating, "This will not be my last meal." Angel Nieves Diaz. Angel Nieves Diaz was convicted of shooting and killing the manager of a strip club in Florida in 1979. He maintained his innocence until his death. In July 1978, Diaz killed the director of a drug rehabilitation center, stabbing him 19 times while he was sleeping. He was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. In 1979, Diaz escaped from the Rio Piedras State Penitentiary. He then fled to Florida. On December 29, 1979, Diaz, along with accomplices Angel Sammy Toro and another unidentified man, robbed the Velvet Swing Lounge in Miami. During the robbery, they killed 49-year-old manager Joseph Nagy. In 1986, Diaz was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. On December 13, 2006, Diaz was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison. Diaz declined any special meal. Then he was offered the standard prison meal, but he refused to eat that as well. Ronnie Paul Threadgill. Ronnie Paul Threadgill was a Texas man executed by lethal injection on April 16, 2013, for the 2001 murder of 17-year-old Dexter McDonald during a carjacking in Navarro County. On April 14, 2001, McDonald and 2 friends were leaving a nightclub near Corsicana, Texas, when they got into a car. Threadgill approached and fired 2 shots. One struck McDonald, who was seated in the back, passing through his arm and into his chest. Threadgill then drove off with McDonald still in the vehicle. Shortly after, he stopped, pulled McDonald's from the car, and left him on the street. McDonald later died at the hospital from his injuries. Threadgill led police on a high-speed chase along Interstate 45. After crashing the stolen car into a ditch, he fled on foot and was eventually found hiding under a semi-trailer at a truck stop. Threadgill was convicted of capital murder in July 2002 and sentenced to death. On April 16, 2013, Threadgill was executed at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. His final statement was, "To my loved ones and dear friends, I love y'all and appreciate y'all for being there. I am going to a better place. To all the guys back in the row, keep your heads up, keep up the fight. I am ready. Let's go." He was pronounced dead at 6:39 p.m. CDT. In 2011, Texas abolished the practice of allowing death row inmates to choose their last meals. As a result, Threadgill was served the standard prison meal, which included baked chicken, mashed potatoes with country gravy, vegetables, sweet peas, bread, tea, water, and punch. Willie James Pye. Willie James Pye was executed by lethal injection on March 20, 2024, at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson. In November 1993, Willie James Pye and two accomplices went to rob the home of his ex-girlfriend, Alicia Lynn Yarbrough, in Spalding County, Georgia. They found her alone with her baby, abducted her, took her to a motel where she was raped, and later drove her to a remote spot where Pye shot her 3 times in the back of the head. He was convicted in 1996 and sentenced to death, while Adams received 5 consecutive life sentences, and Freeman, who testified against the others, was later paroled. Pye was executed by lethal injection on March 20, 2024. For his last meal, Pye requested 2 chicken sandwiches, 2 cheeseburgers, French fries, 2 bags of plain potato chips, and 2 lemon-lime sodas, though he did not eat them. He declined to make a final statement but accepted a prayer before the execution. David Dean Martin. David Dean Martin was an American mass murderer executed in Louisiana on January 4, 1985, for the 1977 killings of 4 people in Bayou Blue, Louisiana. Born on February 24, 1952, in Keene, Texas, Martin moved to Louisiana in 1973 after marrying Gloria. He worked as a church youth counselor and held various jobs, including maintenance work and carpentry. On August 14, 1977, Martin entered a trailer in Bayou Blue and fatally shot 4 individuals, his wife's lover, Bobby Todd, 33, and 3 others, Terry Hebert, 27, Ann Tierney, 19, and Sandra Brake, 19. He fired 15 shots, reloading twice during the attack. Martin later claimed he was under the influence of PCP and unaware of his actions. Martin was arrested the day after the murders and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. During his trial in April 1978, he was convicted on all counts and sentenced to death. On January 4, 1985, Martin was executed by electric chair at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. He declined to make a final statement and did not request a special last meal, instead consuming the standard prison fare of sloppy joes and French fries.